Father Becker, off on his hunting trip, gives me the opportunity to be here with all of you. And so I'm happy to have a chance to celebrate this Mass with you tonight. Tonight is the Gospel reading and that Old Testament reading from Deuteronomy, of course, are tied together. They cause us to ask the question, well, what is life all about? How should we live our lives? If you were to look across our culture here in the United States, you'd come to the conclusion rather quickly that most people are not at Mass tonight, huh? In fact, when you look at the statistics, about half of the adult population in the United States will say that yes, they're religious. Only about 39% of Catholics are in Mass each and every Sunday. So the rest of them, I'm not sure what they're doing. Maybe tonight it's the football game, Packers versus the Patriots. But it says something about our culture, that people choose to do other things than to worship God with their whole heart, their whole soul, their whole strength and understanding. But for the people of Israel, those words that we heard in Deuteronomy really formed the center of their life. It was what life was all about for them, to love God with their whole heart. And then, as Leviticus says, to love their neighbor as themselves. In fact, this was so much a part of the culture that I'm certain Jesus, as a little boy, learned those prayers from the lips of Mary and Joseph. He learned how to pray what the Jewish people called the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart. Yesterday, across the nation, there was an invitation from synagogues and temples for non-Jews to come and show their solidarity with the Jewish people here in the United States as a pushback, if you will, as a sign of support following the massacre in Pittsburgh last week. And so I took it upon myself to go down to morning prayer at Beth Jacob Synagogue in Mendota Heights. Rabbi Morris Allen, who serves as one of our associate chaplains here at the university, is a rabbi there, and he invited me to come. And it was a profound experience. It was a wonderful experience. But I couldn't help but to notice at the center of that prayer, in fact, morning prayer lasts for 3 hours. I thought, well, they certainly have something on us. I mean, we get antsy after about 45 minutes and think, oh, it's time to leave. But so during that 3-hour period, in the center of it are those very words that we hear from Deuteronomy. And they're part of not only morning prayer, but the evening prayers that are recited at the home. They're the linchpin, they're really the center of how Jewish people interpret their standing before God and how they understand what it is that God is asking of them, how they are to live as people. So, we're certain that those words were on the lips of Jesus as a little boy, and not surprisingly then, when this individual comes to Jesus and asks, well, what's the greatest law? What's Jesus going to say? He's going to say those words known as the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your strength, with all your understanding, with all your might, and your neighbor as yourself. On Wednesday here at the university campus, for those of you who are visitors and didn't have an opportunity to participate, we had an afternoon where we could reflect on what it means to love our neighbor, particularly what it means to stand against racism, prejudice, and bigotry. And the field house was full. It was packed. I think someone told me about 5,000 faculty, staff, and students were in attendance. I reckon it's not our whole university population, but it was a significant number of us who participated in that. And if you were there, you know, as you went through the doors into the field house, they gave you a button, which I have in my pocket here, with a palm in our colors, purple and white. Racism stops with me. And then we heard about how to have more awareness around the problem of prejudice and bigotry, which still is in our country and in some areas is rampant. And I know some people were uncomfortable with the conversation. I ran into an individual after it was over who said to me, well, I don't know what I was supposed to get out of that. And I thought, wow, you know, you spent all afternoon thinking about perhaps your own prejudicial attitudes, but you don't know what you're supposed to get out of it. What I took away from that is probably the one word that kept surfacing for me was empathy. To be able to have understanding for what it means to be another person, to be a member of a minority. What does that mean? I don't know what that means because I grew up white and in a white neighborhood. I don't know what it means to be a minority, but I want to try to understand, and I think the gospel, particularly the gospel for tonight, calls us to try to get into that place where we do understand and where we have that empathy and we can say, I can't say that I know your experience because I don't, but I want to be able to empathize. I want to be able to understand. Help me to do that. And in my way of thinking, this is what the gospel calls us to. It's not the only thing the gospel calls us to, but it's certainly one of the things that this particular gospel that we have tonight calls us to, that love of neighbor. And furthermore, James tells us that, you know, you can't profess to love God with your whole heart if you don't also love your neighbor. In fact, he turns it to the negative and he says, well, if you say that you love God but you hate your neighbor, what does he say? He says, well, you're lying. That's not true. It can't be. You cannot profess to love God with your whole heart, your whole soul, all of your strength and understanding, and harbor prejudice or bigotry or any kind of ill will toward a sister or a brother. Tonight we're gathered for this Eucharistic celebration, and as I said, I'm very happy to be with you tonight. One of the things as Catholic Christians we say happens each